people have asked me to address this. And it becomes sensitive for me because I'm like, I've lost children,
right.
and it's hard for me to correlate that to the loss of a pet. But I think it's this piece of cumulative grief that we're not addressing in any stage of our life. And then especially you get to a place where you're losing multiple people, and this, you have this one steady that's there every day. So some of the theories that I like on grief are attachment theories, like how much time are you spending with the person or pet that you lost? I am super excited to introduce Jason Debueno, a licensed clinical social worker, personal friend, has been with me along my journey, was there when Reggie died and worked at the same place. And so we have grown professionally together, and super excited to really kind of talk about you personally and your mental health journey, right? We're all on a journey, but you are now specializing in the elderly. And it's something we don't talk about, depression and anxiety in the elderly. What does mental strength look like in this last season of your life? So let's just start with introduce yourself professionally, like your credentials, your experience.
Well, you know me, and you know me well, and we know each other a long time. So before I can even introduce myself professionally, first I have to say thank you for the opportunity to connect with you again. And I will tell you, one of the things I was reflecting on when you had invited me to participate, I was going back to when we worked together, and there was this one person who was walking down the hall, and you and I must have been talking about something, and she comes up to me afterwards. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you. And she said, "The two of you have the most unique laughs." I feel so connected to you. It's just really that belief that you can, in times of stress, in times of trouble, there has got to be a way to see that lining of hope. And you've been just a real inspiration in that regard for so many, personally for me too. I will let you know that, as you said, yes, we work together at the Mental Health Center, but the drive and the passion that I have as a social worker is really to be able to address the needs of older adults in this community. I'm a native to Colorado Springs. I believe very much that our community is a great place to age, but I think that there's a lot of people that live here that may not fully know and recognize the amount of struggle that they may be experiencing even in the moment of, because there's been a real conditioning. You'll make it through, you're strong, you're resilient, you've lived a long life. At some point it takes a toll, and at some point we sometimes forget how to get to the humanness of who we are, but for some reason, sometimes it's even more vacant in older adults. And so what brings me to this field and what has brought me to this field is particularly the organization I work for, which is Silver Key Senior Services. I'm the president and CEO of the organization. But what started in volunteering way back in the 80s, my great-grandmother and I used to take her on the Silver Key bus to the senior center. And when I started doing that, I was there more as a companion to her, but that's when they had this new program that they just started with youth. And the youth were going in to change the lights and locks for the seniors. Lights so they wouldn't trip, locks so they felt secure. And I was on the lights and locks program for many years. And then what happened is...
Do you still have that?
We just got a handyman connection to keep people healthy and well for the long haul, so we just started it again. But during that time, I stayed involved with Silver Key as a volunteer for all these years. And and so when this position became available, it truly was just an opportunity to really be what really my heart speaks to and what it means for me to be in this community. And my grandparents are very much part of who I am and who I was, and very much part of me. And in some ways, I feel like I'm giving back a bit.
And as you've taken this on full time, which was about 8 years ago?
About just going into 6 years now.
How did that change the way you look at aging?
I don't know that it changed the way I looked at aging. I think it gave me a different view of how I look at our community. And what I mean by that, because we're a very large family here in Colorado Springs. I have over 200 family members that live here in the Springs. And we're a very big family, multi-generational. We care for our grandparents and our great-grandparents. I mean, it is very much a tight-knit, broad community. And so in some ways I lived very sheltered from what the rest of the world in some ways growing up was, or what that meant. And I think because of how ingrained I am with my family, it's been a little bit more of a insulated view. So when I came into this place, I think in some ways I believed and actually wholeheartedly trusted that truly people do have those kind of connections and they move into that older adult community or age group, and the reality is they don't, and too many don't. So I think that it wasn't...
Do you think it's culturally? Because you come from a Hispanic large family. Right. Do you think some of that is cultural?
Ours is absolutely cultural.
Okay.
And I've thought more about this too. I think it's cultural. I think in some ways we also, I believe that there's some economics involved too. You know, grandparents took care of the grandkids kind of thing. I mean, that was part of my path forward. And I think also just socially, because as you have families that grow to that large of connection, they connect with each other differently. And so I think that's what I've seen as a real gap in the community related to older adults. They just simply don't have that kind of connection.
Yeah. And do you think it's because a lot of people talk about Colorado Springs being a transient community, or not? Most people are not from here. What do you see in the older community?
Going back to your comment about culture, I think there's a culture of, not maybe in the cultural belief that I have, but generally there's an appreciation that people have lived their lives, they're independent, they don't want to be connected at the older age group. I think that there's some of that. I think also we're a little bit less transient now that people are aging after the military. Maybe they have been here before, they've come back to retire. Maybe that's where we've had a little bit more stability in terms of the people who are staying. As the city grows and trying to build an infrastructure for people to want to stay here, I think it's becoming a magnet for it. But I think that there's a whole generation that have really missed out on being rooted here enough with large enough family. And I still think that we don't make enough connection between people and who we kind of live next to, and how do we connect and how do we partner.
Yeah. So tell us, we'll start with kind of maybe a sad representation of what the elderly might be struggling with, and then kind of tell us about, you know, after engaging in Silver Key and the connections that they're able to have. And but just starting with kind of the problem of...
So the problem, there's a lot. But I'll just start first with the idea, because of the framework of Mentally Strong, I'm going to start first with the idea of isolation and loneliness. And I'll tell you kind of an example of what happens with that. You probably have seen, as certainly I have, the news about how many people in the older adult category are being taken advantage of with scams and different things like that.
Ooh, yeah.
But one of the things you may not be aware of is that, as an example, this is just one example of many. There's a woman that I know that we were working with at one point who came to us because she got identified as needing support out of the apartment complex that she lived in. So we went to go in and check on her and see what was going on. And it was so interesting to me that she had all these boxes, just boxes and boxes of stuff. I wondered, what is this? Is she moving? What is it?
Right.
And then when you come to find out, you open up some of the boxes because it was becoming a safety hazard. There was so much of it.
Okay.
And it wasn't necessarily to the point of where somebody was maybe hoarding. It was really more, it was very all organized, but there was just so much of it. Come to find out, how many can openers does one person need?
2 at the most.
At the most. Especially a little old lady, and they weren't automatic, they were just... But you know actually what had happened after we learned a little bit more? It was because when she was calling the Home Shopping Network and QV and all of these shows, there were people that were engaging with her. And it wasn't about the can opener that she was paying for. It was the fact that somebody was talking to her. That is just tragic. And there was so much stuff. So that's an example of where people will find a way to connect, even if it takes away their money, even if it takes away maybe even the feeling like the meaningful connection is truly at that human to human, where it's really more transactional, where somebody is taking something from me. This is why scams are really, unfortunately, targeting older adults, is because there is so much degree of isolation and loneliness.
Yeah.
And we can even go a further step in that when we move to the point of where somebody has got depleted capacity or impaired limitations due to driving, connection to the community, all of those other pieces are very much points and gaps and struggle for individuals. But that is where I think the upshot is. It really is an opportunity to connect differently with older adults that can change a whole path. And we see that every day with Silver Key. We see that in the way our Meals on Wheels drivers. It's not uncommon. In fact, it's very, 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 very common that maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, sometimes even more of that, where people will come up to me and they'll say, "Did you know I was a Meals on Wheels driver 20 years ago?" Or my daughter used to go. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. And why aren't you volunteering now? But you think about the way it changes the idea of what aging is and who that person is and that kind of thing. So those are the kind of things that I think are the real upshot, is that when you get connected differently with older adults, then you learn, and it really does become generational. So that is the upshot, and I can tell you a little bit about the history of Silver Key if you're interested.
Yeah, and I'd love to know, I know you have a passion and a vision, and you've done a lot since you've been there. How are you connecting these people who are feeling alone and that kind of stuff?
So what we're doing currently, I'm very excited to announce that we got approved for, and we have built a 50-unit affordable housing project. It'll be our second Silver Key Apartments, and that one opens up in October.
Okay.
So it's 50 units. It's a drop in the bucket compared to what the need is, but that's the first thing is that if
So you already have one up and running, though?
over by the senior center, there's a
Okay.
33-unit affordable housing project there. This one is an expansion where the Silver Key system, it's on our campus. And I think that that's what's unique about it, is that we know that when we think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, when we think of what does it mean to really have a foundation, if you don't have a safe, secure housing option, you might as well throw a lot of that other stuff out the window.
Right.
Self-actualization doesn't happen unless you feel that confident. So that's why Silver Key has been moving forward, and we are so excited to announce that we'll be opening in October.
Yeah, that's super exciting.
It's
and do you
huge.
do have activities in the apartment complex so that they can get to know their neighbors? And
Yeah, we're going to
really-
have what's called a Connection Cafe. Silver Key has 13 of them across the communities, and what they are they're a meal program is what it is, but you bring in all the individuals that live in these communities, they come together, socialize, connect, and enjoy healthy, nutritious meals together, and we will host one of those at the apartments, and it's available to the community.
Yay.
So, yeah.
That's super exciting.
Yeah, we also, over the last year and a half, we acquired 2 organizations. One is Tri-Lake Silver Alliance, and the other one is Mountain Community Senior Services. So
Okay.
through that acquisition, we now have a senior center up north in Monument, and I'm like, yay!
Yay!
And so we're taking that, and we're taking some of the what we've learned from that to establish one in the south. So we'll have more activity programming. So it's not just about the meal; it's about we have a pool table, we got a piano, and we're looking for volunteers. So anybody wants to
Yeah.
volunteer, come on in. But then also what we have in that acquisition, going back to the lights and locks, we acquired Mountain Community that did transportation and handyman services in the north area. So we're bringing that to the community as well, with the idea that we really want to support people to live in their homes, connected in the community of choice, rather than going to that higher level of care.
Right. And so let's shift a little bit to
Yeah.
the mental health. You talked about Maslow's hierarchy, and you guys are doing a really good job of that initial physical and then, social connection. What kind of like mental illness or diagnoses are you seeing in the elderly population?
It's anxiety and depressive disorders. However, there is another one that's been recently introduced in the DSM, the idea of prolonged grief, and what does that mean? Certainly we have traumas, PTSD, and those type of things, but that's an interesting one that I think we probably have seen more with our clinicians, that we have not in the past really explored that, because we equate a lot of it to this is situational. It's you're moving forward with maybe a generalized anxiety disorder, or it's, again, situational, where it's an adjustment disorder type of arrangement. But really what we're learning is a lot of this comes from prolonged grief that's been untreated, undertreated, or just...
Which goes to my passion of like, let's start this conversation around grief. We have to, be open about it. It is a part of life, and many times in the elderly population, they've even lost children, and could be, whole generations of people around them that they continue to lose. So a cumulative grief, but we treat it as, well, it's natural, right? Because you've made it to 80 years old. You're going to have lost people, right? But it takes away from that human experience of, it's still grief for them. It's still, intense loss for them. When someone loses a baby, they get all this wraparound support.
Yes.
But when an 80-year-old loses their 60-year-old child, it doesn't give the same community attention around that.
And I really like I like the word, and unfortunately the challenge with that cumulative that you talked about. So as you were describing, let's say somebody loses a child at that age group, but let's also say that somebody who has lost a child builds a community with a community of others that are in the same age group, and then they're starting to pass. And so then this continued individual is living past not only family, but now friends. And also, I think what happens is that you just start to see that there's a lot of loss in the path of aging. You get loss of capacity of being able to maybe walk the way you did, drive the way you did, work together. And so one of the things that I think I've learned that is something a little bit newer piece for me that I had not really appreciated maybe as much as I've come to appreciate is that in all of that path, sometimes older adults will adopt an animal, a cat or a dog. And when you think about all that prolonged grief and the cumulative effect of that, it really does start to have a way for some being to be able to connect with. And because of the nature of isolation and loneliness and not being well connected with our community, older adults can sometimes really invest that this is a lifeline to me feeling like I can get to the point of being hopeful for another day. The animal is what's being my bridge to being hopeful. And I have never really appreciated the degree of loss that somebody experiences in the older adult category where they've had loss of children, family, friends, spouses, etc. And yet they've got this puppy or this dog that they've had for the last 8-10 years, and then the animal passes because it now is something that has been all invested in that cumulative piece, and it goes away. It's a very profound and very
well, and this came up in the grief documentary too, of and it's only a small clip in the grief documentary where I'm walking down the beach with my mom, and now my mom has lost her first husband, my dad. She's lost her first 2 grandchildren, and she skips to the most recent loss of her dog. And I kind of call her on it, we were talking about the loss of your grandchildren, and you moved to the dog. And it wasn't until the editor saw that clip, and she was like, and I was like, don't judge my mom. That's not how it seemed. It's not the reality, even though that's what it looked like in the film. And when she went back and interviewed her, it was like, I can't go there. That grief is too much. I don't know how to process that. I don't know how to. And then to do it in front of me where she feels like my grief is those are my kids and it's too much and she's supposed to be strong for me. So, it was easier to talk about the death of her dog, who she loves dearly. But I think you're right, and I'm glad we're having this conversation because it's several people to address this. And it becomes sensitive for me because I'm like, I've lost children, and it's hard for me to correlate that to the loss of a pet. But I think it's this piece of cumulative grief that we're not addressing in any stage of our life. And then especially you get to a place where you're losing multiple people, and this, you have this one steady that's there every day. So some of the theories that I like on grief are attachment theories, like how much time are you spending with the person or pet that you lost? You might only see your mom 4 times a year, but you are with your pet, probably 24 hours a day at that age. And so those are real losses, and it might be like the straw that kind of makes you give up or want to give up.
Particularly because that animal, or that, I'll say being that exists within that animal is accepting you at face value, even with the fact that you aren't as stable as you used to be. You aren't, and you're walking, even though you're not as able to manage completely. The animal accepts you at face value. Gosh, what if we accepted people at face value? Couldn't we learn something from that? Wouldn't that be novel?
But we have all of these kind of external expectations, and some of that grief you talk about of losing your ability and grief of aging. What are some things that you do and you train your therapist to do in helping people in this stage of life? Mental strength is different in the last season of your life. I think addressing grief, allowing people to grieve, openly is important. What else are you doing?
Well, I think that the idea of loss and grief and traumas, frequently what surfaces in that is the idea of, do I have purpose? what is my purpose like? What does that mean? What does that mean for me? How do I radically accept the situation I'm in and find a way to be able to be purposeful in my life in the frame that I can't change what's happened around me?
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the things, particularly with older adults, is that, and particularly those that are in retirement age, moving into retirement, there's been a number of individuals that are concerned, like, what am I've got the resource to be able to retire well, I've got the capacity to retire well, but even though I've got all the makings of retiring well, I have no purpose because everything was invested in my job. Everything was invested in my family. Everything was invested in, for me, all of my not dollars necessarily, but just me, I was fully, and then that goes away or gets minimized. That's where I think that we have really tried to be intentional with our clinical teams, is how do we make sure that we tap into and really understand where a purposeful life can be? Because once you find purpose, then I think you find hope. And if you find hope, then you find resilience. And I think resilience is really the factor that goes forward in the way that older adults age well. Yeah. Some of the people that we work with are my mom, she runs 5 miles a day. I believe my mom's all over. I'm like, what is wrong with me? But the thing is, it's the way I say that is because the thing is that if you find the degree of being able to find hope and find that purposefulness in that, you can start to do things that maybe not even you thought possible. Right. Because again, you're really kind of accepting the situation you're in, but you're seeing it differently. That's the piece that we really move forward with our teams to be able to tap into that.
Right, because we have, as long as we are breathing, we have purpose.
Yes.
And I think, I talk about this a lot, and in the Mentally Strong Method, we have a section for spiritual conflict. And professionally, there's this huge fear of proselytization, so it's like we kind of separate, we don't talk about our spiritual self and eternity and things like that. But when we're in this last season of our life, how are you at Silver Key kind of allowing people to discuss that journey?
I guess I would say it's not so much of a permission because people bring who they are, when they are, how they are. So I wouldn't say that we're necessarily giving permission for that. What I am saying is that we're creating a safe space for people to find whatever that looks like. Because there's a number of people that come into our organization that certainly have not identified spirituality or faith or a belief in something larger themselves is necessarily where they're at the moment. They're worried about paying the bills. They're worried about their utilities being cut off and things like that. So that may not be the place that we start with, but then when we really do engage, that's when we really learn what is the faith community that you're involved with and how can you activate that. You had asked about how do we work with our clinical teams. The other side of the coin is that while I believe therapy has its place, I also believe that therapy can be a real encumbrance for working with older adults because we can diagnose, we can treat, we can do all that. But the reality is many of the individuals in the later season, as you that language you used, in that later season, what it is about how do we navigate the system around the individual to strengthen the system that they're involved with. So that's why what we've done recently is very much engage the idea of training up coaches or peer support coaches so that we've got peers who are in the older adult category, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and now I can be a champion for you. And so it's driven more by the therapist saying, I'm not going to do any more therapy that's going to move this person out of that frame of feeling maybe a little bit less capable or hopeful, but what could is if they had somebody that was partnered with them to be able to walk through that challenge differently with them. And that's why I think our peer and our case management sort has been amazing. The problem with it is that it's very easy, as you can imagine, that once you become engaged, and clinically we know this, is that once you get engaged, there's a level of sometimes so much connection that it can get to the point where it becomes a dependence of. And that's a fine balance because what we want to do is we want to be able to bring in that support, build a strong system of support, and really move through so it moves to a natural support system. That's why we have to make sure that there's avenues of activity programming available to link to. That's why the faith community is an important piece to link to, and that is why the neighboring part that we were talking about earlier is important to link to, because there's so many people that you can't, I don't think it's right to build this artificial idea of connection to address isolation as a forever stamp. I think it's a bridge toward, and so we've been very intentional about how do we bridge toward get people involved in our community, whether it's bowling or our connection cafes, whatever the case may be. That's the path forward, I believe. Therapy has its place. Don't get me wrong, but I think in older adults,
about grief being a big thing.
Yeah,
they're in this later season. They are having to wrestle with possible death at some point. We all die. I know you have
The 5 wishes.
5 wishes, and going through that process. You know, talking about grief and death is a spiritual conversation.
Yeah.
So tell me some of the things that you're working.
Yeah, so I will share with you our 5 Wishes program. And if you're not familiar, your listeners aren't aware of 5 Wishes, what it is, it's an advanced care planning document. And it was developed through the teachings of Mother Teresa. And Mother Teresa believed that the gift to a caregiver is to really give information at the end of life, so that you aren't in the moment of that trauma feeling like, I need to make decisions about how would I want to be treated? What would that look like? How would the community come together? How would I celebrate the community that I was part of? And so the wishes are really more about how you want to inform your family and friends on the front end. But what's beautiful about it, different than maybe some of the other advanced care planning documents, and it's really the one that is that I find most valuable, at least for me, is that I told you we got a very large family. When my grandfather passed away, and my grandparents were steeped in our family, were very, very family. When he passed away, it wasn't about the arguments about the house or the whatever little bit of resource that they were able to. It wasn't even. It was about his knife, his damn knife. He gets the knife. And the thing is that wouldn't it be something else if he would have on the front end been able to say, this is where I would want that to go, because it's sometimes those little trinkets or those valuable things that have so much more meaning than anything else of true, like, maybe dollar value. It's that emotional value. To be fair, I got the knife, just so you know. But that's what I think the value of 5 Wishes is. And I will let you know the reason why we also brought it in, and because our tagline, as you were saying, is that, the end is all of us. So aging is all of us is our tagline. And the reason why I brought 5 Wishes into our organization is because I believe that these conversations should happen regardless of whether you're older adult, young adult.
Yes. Yeah.
And one of our people on staff, she said, I gave this to my son who was just getting, they're in the process, they just got married. They were at the time, getting ready to get married, and they had gone through marriage counseling and all of these things, the pre-marriage counseling. And the son and soon-to-be daughter-in-law went through this process. And they both came up to her and they said, we've gone through all of this ready. We know each other well. We thought we knew each other well. We went through that premarital counseling. We never really knew each other until we asked the question, how would you want to be celebrated when you pass? So when you think about that deep of connection, that's why it's important to have that conversation. Because there's nothing more intimate, nothing more connected, and nothing more valuable. And to Mother Teresa's training, nothing more of a gift to be able to say, this is how I want to be treated when I pass, and this is the gift I give you so that you don't have to be burdened by that.
And we were able to do a lot of those things with my husband because he was on hospice. We knew it was coming. And, he even made recordings for some of his best friends. Cool. And it just was a very special time, things that we will have forever. Unlike that losing my children was like this traumatic grief that you're fighting. Yeah. And I think we don't talk about these things enough. And, hopefully we can not be afraid of death, right? That's that spiritual piece of not being afraid of death, but also, being able to have those relationships and connections before you die is an actual gift. But we sometimes are fighting the inevitable.
And if we went from the emotional, let's say, because we fight the inevitable about that, and if we went through, normally we say kind of get out of your lizard brain and move into, but in this case I say sometimes activate your lizard brain, because here's the reality: if you don't plan on the front end, this will be highly costly emotionally, financially, and a burden to the community. You will have a lot of any kind of wealth that you've created erode in the courts because your lizard brain didn't take over and said, this just makes sense. Financial sense to talk about that. So that would be the one thing that I would say is, unfortunately, sometimes we get so caught up in that concern about the conversation because of the emotionality. Allow another part of your brain to take over and say, this is because it makes sense. Truly, not just the gift of understanding, but the gift of planning. And that's the part that sometimes gets lost.
Yeah. And even, how much life-saving things do you want? How do you want to be, kept alive if you can't speak? Having those conversations with your loved ones is hard,
It is.
but it was such a gift for me and my husband. Like he knew that he did not want to be taken care of, you know, and having, you know, just knowing that it's okay to let go where they want to let go and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Beautiful.
So, perfect. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked there. So what else can you tell us about the community here in Colorado Springs?
So if I can share this with you, is that the Silver Key System organization was really established back in the 54 years ago.
Okay.
And the way it was established is because tuberculosis was an epidemic, and people were moving to Colorado for the air quality and the therapeutics that were available at that time. So Union Printer Home is where a number of the people were moving to. And what happened at that time, there were 3 volunteers who recognized that people weren't dying necessarily because of the TB. They were dying because they weren't connected through their community, especially since they've left family and that type of thing. So the root of Silver Key is really on being connected and companion with each other. So this is one of the other things that we've brought forward in this community, which has been amazing about our community. We went from our Meals on Wheels program, which is very episodic and a quick kind of check in and connect, to even went further to the point of this companionship model, where we have volunteers who are willing to give an hour plus a day with an individual to, you know, go to bingo, go to, you know, fishing, go to whatever the case may be. And this community has rallied around that in such a great way. We have got so many of the best volunteers in this organization. And so I'm very hopeful about the strength of this community because of what I see every day. We have anywhere between 200 to 400 volunteers depending on the season. And so we're, you know, that's what we do, is we take in volunteers in a lot of different ways to be able to bring that connection. So that is really our history, and that's
so
why I'm
tell us
hopeful.
the 2 ways if we need services or we want to volunteer. How do we connect?
So if you want to volunteer, we have our companionship, our Meals on Wheels, transportation, thrift stores. So the way that you come into Silver Key to volunteer, you can go to info@silverkey.org and just let us know, and we'll have our volunteer coordinator get back to you. info@silverkey.org or 719-884-2300 is our silver line, where you call in and we get you connected. The same thing for anybody who has a need in older adult care, and it isn't just about those 4 categories or the therapy or any of those pieces. You call us if you have a need. We know the community, we know the older adult support system. We activate it internally when we can, and we're humble enough to know when we can't. So we link to very trusted partners, Mentally Strong being one of them, and we link through. So that's the way you can come in.
So what if it's a family member or a loved one who the actual person who needs the services is really kind of resistant in taking this loneliness to, you know, kind of a recluse or withdrawal type symptoms? Are there ways that you reach out?
We do.
Okay. So we have
navigators.
tell them the story and
and also I'll just share with you that we have we call it the Silver Bot. It's on our website, and what it is that we now support a number of family members who don't live here. So what they'll do is, through the bot, they'll tell us what the situation is, and then we activate our navigators, and that way we can stand up care and then keep that link back to family. So in some ways become a little bit of a surrogate family. So that's the other way we support individuals. But call, let us know what the situation is, and we'll get our team involved.
How do you define older adult? Is there an age?
If you define yourself as an older adult and you think that Silver Key is the right place for your service, then, and we have people, actually, if just real side quick note is that we have a full pantry of support for the community. And one of our funding streams had changed their focus from general population to just kiddo work. And it's been a long time funder for Silver Key, and I was like, oh, geez, you know, times are tough. We got to figure this. And so what we did is we actually went through the data of our pantry, and we realized we had 220 kiddos that we were supporting food for. And so we applied for that, and we got approved. So we're now a kid program. So really, aging is all of us. If Silver Key's the right place for your support and what you need, it's not about the age of what's on your license, of what's on your birth certificate. It really is about, if we're the right place for you, call us. We'll be there, and if we're not the right place for you after you learn who we are, or you need a referral, we'll get you where you need to be.
Okay, very exciting. All of that information will be down in the description. So get out there, support Silver Key, get your older adults in your life connected.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.